Good afternoon and welcome to our Fireside Chat with Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel. I'm Brandon Dupler, Principal of Dupler Office and the Board Chair for your Columbus Chamber of Commerce. We're thrilled to have everyone here and thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to share a brief video from Derek Clay, our CEO and President. He is unable to be with us today and wanted to share a few words. So let's take a look.
On behalf of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you to the Fireside Chat with our Lieutenant Governor, Jim Tressel. On behalf of our 2,500 businesses throughout the region, we would like to say thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, and go Bucks.
Thank you, Derek. All right, I'd like to send a sincere thank you to our sponsors today. A special thanks to our leader sponsor, Voorhees, and our patron sponsor, Columbia Gas, and for all of our 2025 investor partners and their ongoing support. Well, today's conversation is certainly going to be engaging and insightful, featuring Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel and our esteemed host, Colleen Marshall from NBC4, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and 11 p.m. Lieutenant Governor has a lifelong passion for workforce and development. He previously served as president for Youngstown State University, where he led transformational growth in enrollment, fundraising, and student achievement. Many also know from his coaching career, he includes his national championship with Ohio State, as well as titles at Youngstown State University. A member of the College Football Hall of Fame, Tressel brings a commitment to excellence and public service. He and his wife Ellen are deeply engaged in our philanthropy and community and involvement. Please join me in welcoming Colleen Marshall and Coach Jim Tressel to the stage.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I have to push this button here that they told me.
Are all of our mics on? They have us mic'd 6
Got
different
like 11
ways. And
mics
then
here.
there's a mic here too. So somewhere someone will be listening to us. Okay, so I am going to start with the question that you know as a journalist I have to ask.
Okay.
It's the question everybody wants to hear, so I'm going to get it out of the way. What are the chances you'll be running for governor?
You know, I thought that might come, but I wasn't sure it would be first. And Colleen and I have worked together probably since 2001, and I never answered her back then. So I'm not sure I've matured enough to answer her now. But, you know, it's been fun trying to learn about a whole new world. And when you said what's new, really what's new is what I'm doing every day, watching Mike DeWine. And when he asked me to get involved in this, first thing I said was, I don't even know what a lieutenant governor does. And he said, whatever I tell you to do. So I'm used to that at home. And right off the bat, he said, after we said yes, he said, now look, they're going to constantly ask you if you're here to run. He said, you better keep focused on what you're doing because you don't even know if you'll like this, and we don't even know if you'll be any good at this. So why don't you just stay focused on what you're doing, and we'll talk about it when the time is right. So I guess my response to you is, we'll talk about it when the time is right.
When's the time going to be right?
In July, how's that?
Okay.
I'll make that up.
Okay. Well, I do have to tell you this. I was speaking with somebody in the Democratic Party who had just spent a lot of time with county leaders from both parties and did an independent poll, he said, of the county leaders from all parts of Ohio. All of them said they would back Jim Tressel. And I think that it's because local government, county government leaders are looking for some stability, and people see that in you, don't they? I mean, do you think that's one of the things that attracted Governor DeWine to you? You know, your players used to call you the senator. you're even-keeled, you're strategic, you're smart. What do you think it was that had Mike DeWine say, I'm going to pick Jim Tressel to be lieutenant governor?
Well, he says that because we'd worked so much on education and workforce while I was president at Youngstown State, and that he knew that I had run large programs, whether it was Ohio State football or a university, and he told me he was in good health, but he said, you still have to, just in case something happens, you have to have someone who could maybe step in and manage. And so that's why he said, and I think that's true. To your point, though, about, I think people are looking to be comfortable, because these have been turbulent times over the last few years. And I do think people, enjoy feeling like they know what someone is all about. And I know going around the state, it's been so much fun, because I've been back in high schools and businesses and all over the state. And, we've got guys from all over the state. I've been in every high school in this state. And it's fun connecting with all the stories. Even here today, there were 5 or 6 people said, I met you at this point, 100 years ago, and I met you over here. And so it's been a lot of fun reconnecting. And I think people do feel as if they know us. But, we'll have to see how this goes.
You've had this trajectory from coach to a university president, now to lieutenant governor. What have you learned at each of those positions that has supported the kind of job that you're doing today?
What's been interesting about the trajectory is that they've been larger entities as I've gone along. It was pretty easy to handle 100 guys and 12 coaches and keep people on the same...
Was it?
Yeah. Keep people on the same page. And then all of a sudden you get to a university that has 12,000 students and a couple thousand employees and 6 different colleges and 4 different unions and people with tenure. And, my players didn't have tenure. They had a bench. And, if things weren't going right, they sat on the bench. But so it got a little bit increasingly, more difficult. Now what I've marveled at watching the governor is you might be in a meeting today and we're talking about the bird flu epidemic that's in western Ohio, and tomorrow it might be something on foster care, and then a storm might be coming and the Ohio River might be cresting and we have to get ready to help the people in Kentucky who are struggling, and then there's the roads, and then there's education, and then there's energy policy, and it's like, it's a lot. And that's what's so impressive about Governor DeWine. I mean, he is well-read, learned on every topic, and if he isn't, he asks questions until he becomes really understanding everyone. So I've just watched, the magnitude get larger in every step that we've taken.
We do have people here, I was speaking earlier, some people from Intel. We are seeing a transformation, almost a renaissance of technology expansion, especially here in Central Ohio. Other parts of the state are jealous of the kind of expansion and development and population growth that we are seeing here. And I know the governor put you on this path for workforce development. Tell me what that's been like and what the challenges are, not only here where we're seeing explosive growth, but other parts of the state. I'm Appalachian, and I know the Appalachian part of the state has always felt like it's left behind. What have been the challenges as you're trying to figure out what to do with the workforce of tomorrow?
I think the entire state feels as if this pendulum is swinging back Ohio's way. I don't sense at all that Cincinnati or Dayton or Toledo or Gallia County or Youngstown, Ohio, feel as if they're left behind. In fact, if you think about our history, we began as an agricultural state, so kind of everybody was carrying the same load. Then all of a sudden, the Industrial Revolution, and you had Youngstown with steel, and Cleveland with steel, and Massillon with steel, and Akron was the rubber capital of the world, and Toledo was the glass capital of the world, and Dayton was the aviation capital of the world, and Cincinnati, Procter & Gamble, and all the insurance and finance industry. I mean, everywhere was booming, and really Columbus was the capital and the university. But now the pendulum has swung back, and after we raised the state, maybe with some other people carrying the ball, but Columbus got to come along with it. Columbus is carrying the ball a little bit right now, and you got Intel and Anduril and all of the people, and it's fun being around companies like that. It reminds me a little bit about being around someone like Goodyear, who wants to be a real leader, but wants everyone else to come along too. They want to make sure the supply chain's coming. They want to make sure, yes, they need their workers, but they don't want to steal the workers from someone else. They want to make sure everyone is taken care of. And I feel that way when I talk to the Intel people and when you talk to the Anduril people. You know, that's all exciting, that's new, that's high tech and all that, but they want everyone else to succeed as well. And so I don't sense that the rest of the state's feeling left behind. It might be the moment where it's not the highlight as it was for 100 years, but if you're really a part of a team, you're okay the times you carry the ball and you're okay the times you block. And I know this about Intel and Anduril and some of the rest. There's going to be some supply chain needs that are going to ripple out, because you don't want your supply chain necessarily too close, because you do have a little bit of a workforce issue. So that supply chain might need to be 2 or 3 hours away, not 10 hours. But the beauty of what we have going on, I think, right now in Ohio is this: the things that made us great when the pendulum was at its best for us in the industrial times, all those things are still in place. We still have Lake Erie. We still have the Ohio River. We have lots of energy under our feet. We have tremendous workforce opportunity with the people that care about family and values and hard work and all those things. And now all of a sudden, a lot of this opportunity is swinging back our way. And that's why it's fun trying to take the challenge that the governor's giving us, is how are we going to make sure we've got that workforce for those fancy jobs that might be coming, but for those everyday mom and pop engineering firm, mid-sized jobs, you know, all the rest. We've got to make sure we can supply the whole thing, and that's going to be the fun challenge.
Well, there has been uncertainty about whether the workforce can meet the demands
Absolutely.
that are on the way. So what's your role in that? And what are you seeing as you try to go out and figure out the workforce scheme here?
You know, I think we've been in a moment. Governor Kasich started the Jobs Ohio and the DeWine administration, and Lieutenant Governor Husted, now Senator Husted, they really ran with that whole, let's attract, let's do a great job, economic development. The moment we're in right now is economic execution, because we've developed. We've got the opportunities. So I think the biggest thing that I have seen going all over the state is I'm not sure how aware and excited everybody is around the state about all we've got going on, all the great opportunities. And two, I'm not sure everyone knows all the extraordinary pathways to prepare you to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. We have about 150 workforce transformation, Office of Workforce Transformation programs all over the state. We have career and tech centers at an all-time high. They have waiting lists. We have technical colleges. Of course, we have our 2-year and our 4-year schools. There is so much going on there that if a person really has the willingness, there's unbelievable opportunity out there for us. And I'm not sure that everybody is aware of that as much, so that's kind of what we're planning to do. We're doing it regionally because every region has a little bit different stuff going on, but every region's got it going on. No one is without good stuff happening. Different opportunities in each region. So we're going to really spend the fall beating the drum regionally, making sure everyone understands the opportunities that are there, the help that's available, whether it's the training or it's the transportation or it's the child care, or whatever it is those barriers are. And then we've got to make sure people understand what they need to bring to the dance. When you talk to business and industry, and I'm sure all these 2,500 business owners will tell you, really what I want is someone who will be there on time, who when they interview and take the job, they'll show up, they'll be creative, they'll be curious, they'll have a good work ethic, they'll have a willingness to work with people. And so we have to make sure we bang the drum a little bit about what you have to bring to the party for these opportunities. And so to me, that's the fun of it. It's like I see our athletic director over here, Ross Bjork. I feel a little bit like Ross, where he's got this schedule where we got Texas on the schedule, we've got USC on the schedule, we got Michigan on the schedule, and now we got to make sure we got the people in place who can beat them. That's where we are as a state. We got the schedule. We got Intel, we got Anduril, we've got all these other companies, Joby Aviation, the tissue paper group up there in Northwest Ohio, Honda's doing new stuff, battery plants. I mean, we've got the schedule. Now we got to get the players.
I always think of you still as the coach. That's hard for me to not have that in my head. I'm just curious, do you think you govern like a coach or you coached like a politician?
That's a good one. Well,
That's what they pay me for.
Yeah, right? Well, I've really never governed. So I've never really been in charge of, like people ask me all the time, hey, someone gave me a sheet of paper here, can you go to such and such? And hey, we've got this going on. I said, well, look, I used to be the head coach. I used to be the president. And I could go wherever I wanted. I made the schedule. Now I'm the assistant coach. I go where I'm told. So I guess I'm governing like when I was an assistant coach, just doing what's told. But you know what? I'm not sure there's a difference between coaching and governing. That's why Mike DeWine's so good, is because he's constantly listening to the needs of his people. All he cares about is that every citizen in Ohio is safe and has a chance to reach their God-given potential. Well, that's no different than a good coach. A good coach, regardless of your stars or whoever, all you care about is all 110 guys have a chance to reach their potential and prepare themselves for the rest of life. Sure, you have to win some games, just like the governor has to, I guess, win some elections or have some things go the right way or whatever. But really, what you're trying to accomplish is no different in coaching and governance, because you're trying to serve. In fact, we were at the STEM event this morning, so I had to throw a little science at them. They thought I was just a coach. So I gave them a little Albert Einstein. I have no idea where he coached. But anyway, concern for man and his fate must form the chief interest of all technical endeavors. Never forget this in the midst of your diagrams and equations. Sure, there's technical stuff to do. There's diagrams and equations. There's X's and O's. But concern for man and his fate, our players and their future, must form the chief interest of those technical endeavors. And that's the same thing if you're governing, right? I mean, concern for the citizens and their fate amidst all these technical things that are going on. So I would say, if I ever governed, I would govern like I coached, making sure that I was concerned about the future of the people.
You mentioned earlier Anduril, and I was fortunate to interview their strategic vice president.
Zach Mears, yep.
Yeah, very smart man. By the way, he'll be on the spectrum this week along with Coach Jim Tressel. But he was talking about the business model that they have, where when we think of the industrial military complex, you have basically 5 big defense contractors, Boeing, Northrop, the Lockheed, that are used to coming up with ideas for weapons going to the government, asking the government to pay for the development and to pay for the distribution. Whereas Andrew, coming to Columbus, has the idea that we put our own capital into research, our own capital into development, our own capital into making a product ready for the market. And they are going to transform in many ways the defense industry. How important will this 5 million square foot facility be to the future of Central Ohio? And how much, they mentioned Jobs Ohio helping them come here. How important is the state in this project?
You know, I think when Governor Kasich and his team came up with the Jobs Ohio model, we were probably the 40th most attractive state in America in terms of being an attractive place for companies to come. Jobs Ohio was created, a whole new model was developed, and all of a sudden we're in probably the top 5 in the nation. And so I know their work trying to figure out what the needs are of Anduril or Intel or maybe someone that wants to expand. You know, that's not just new companies, but maybe someone wants to get bigger. And so I think they've been critical. If it weren't for that development, I'm not sure we'd be sitting here in this moment with Anduril here or Intel here. And so they've obviously been differential. But I think what it proved was you need public-private partnership. It's just like Anduril is talking as I listen. They're not just going to count on the government, the public sector, to fund it all. They're going to invest privately. And they're going to not count on nothing but help from the government. And that's really what Jobs Ohio did. We became a public-private entity to attract business. I think that's why we've succeeded. But what's been impressive about they and Intel, as we've been sitting here in Central Ohio, is they want to make sure that, yes, what they do, their model is successful, but that it creates excitement that will raise up everybody else. And I think that's going to be as important as the number of jobs they raise. I just think our self-image is going to boom when you have this, newest of new, highest of technology things happening right here.
Well, let's also talk about what comes along with all of this. They're going to provide 4,000 jobs. How many thousands at Intel?
3,000, yeah.
By the time it's done. There are already thousands out there working. We're in a housing crisis in Columbus. Yeah. City Council was talking about that just last night. What's the state's role in figuring out where do we put all of these people?
I think the biggest thing that we're talking about is making sure that we as a state, we as a region, local groups, really make sure that the regulatory problems are as few as they can be. Because people coming in that need to meet deadlines and need to get X amount of housing because they need to bring in X amount of people and so forth, we've got to meet some deadlines. And so making sure we can streamline the regulatory process is going to be critical for the housing piece, and it's going to be critical for the energy piece. Because along with all the housing that's going to be needed, there's going to be a lot of energy needed as you bring in companies like this and the data centers and all the myriad of things that are coming to our state and really to Central Ohio. So making sure we can get the infrastructure for housing developments, the zoning, you're going to need schools, you're going to need places to shop, all of those things. With every opportunity goes challenges. And if you do nothing, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. If you go out and try to change the world, you're going to have a lot of challenges, and it'll be fun to make sure we can take care of all that.
You talked about infrastructure. The highways also are going to be challenged by all of this. I think they started working on the 70-71 split when I was in kindergarten, which really was 20 years ago. But can the state keep up with the demands of the infrastructure, not just here, but there are going to be supply centers, and there are parts of the state who are hoping, to get in on the action. How do we keep up with the infrastructure when it's been a challenge? There are still parts of the state that don't have broadband. What's the solution, Jim Tressel?
I'll tell you the solution, just not unlike how are you going to play that hard schedule or get that hard, is you better understand that all of you are going to need to collaborate, and there's a lot more challenges than there are dollars to pay for them. And if you want these roads changed, or you want these schools built, or you want this, so forth, and these regulations changed, you're going to have to be patient with each other, and sometimes you're going to have to take a back seat and say, you know what, that needs to be done first. And so cooperation is going to be key. We've got to make sure we're very efficient. I think what's been talked about nationally, which I think has been disrupting the world a little bit, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. We need to get more efficient with the people's money, federally and statewide. We have to be really perfected to what is the best use of that, not which one was someone convinced you that we needed to do that, when really what the team needed was this. So I think that's going to be the key, because there are too many challenges like housing, like infrastructure, like energy, like schools, like roads, that when you have all those challenges, when we were coaching, we were allowed to have 2-hour practices. And it's just by NCAA rule. That's all you could practice, and you had to turn in a sheet, and so forth. And so you had to figure out, how are we going to spend those 2 hours? Because that's all you get. And the other guys have 2 hours, so who's going to spend them better? And so we always tried to have a little bit of a formula that, number one, you have to spend time on things that are fundamental. We had to spend time on blocking and tackling. Well, we've got to spend some part of our revenue on things that are fundamental. Number two, sometimes you have to spend a little bit extra time on something that's harder to do. It's a little bit harder to make sure you master that triple reverse pass, that has 8 people handing off. So you might need to spend a couple extra minutes there. But the last thing that you have to make sure you have time for, and make sure you assign the time to do it, is the things in the game that will have the most impact on the outcome. So you might spend time on 4th and 1 at the goal line and not have one for 5 games, but it might be the difference in the Big Ten championship. So you better have rehearsed the thing that we had. So I think of the finite amount of resources we have in the people's money, we better do a great job of the fundamentals, of some of the things that take a little bit more money than you wish they did, but they're that bridge that goes up and over and down, looks like a spaceship, costs a little bit more, but it's the only way we're going to make it efficient. And then the thing that's going to have the most impact on the team's outcome. And so to me, that's the fun of trying to figure out, how you can be most effective. So you've got to save some money by being more efficient, and you got to be more effective with your planning. No different in coaching, in my mind, than in governing.
Well, a lot of people say the DOGE effort to be efficient and save money was more scattershot than strategic. And we are hearing, for example, the Mid-Ohio Food Bank lost millions in federal funds because of DOGE. The health department here in Columbus lost money. What are you seeing on the state level that the DOGE cuts are doing to other sectors here in Ohio that now the state might have to pick up the slack?
I think what happens is when you go for many, many, many years not being efficient, when you begin to start trying to be efficient, it does get feel a little bit scattered because you're so used to being inefficient. Like, we're losing all this money on X program. Well, we probably couldn't afford X program, but we did for the last 10 years, and we got used to it. And so it looks like, so I've only been delving into the education workforce part deeply. So here's what I've learned about the doging in that one. There was all the conversation that perhaps we didn't need a federal Department of Education, that maybe it had gotten too big and spending too much of the people's money and not getting the results. We're a very middle-of-the-road educational entity in the world, but yet we're spending, so maybe we're not spending the right. That's the hypothesis. So as we went to Washington, D.C., in fact, when Ross and Coach Day and the guys got honored at the White House, we doubled that trip into a meeting with Secretary McMahon in the Secretary of Department of Education. And we're looking for a little bit of guidance, like, hey, we're hearing that this might change, and here's what we came away with. One, nothing that touches the kid is going to get changed. So if there's a needs for disabled services for students, that's not going to get touched. Now, it might not be in the Department of Education. It might be out of another department. Free and reduced lunch. That's not going to be affected. Financial aid for students going to college. That's not going to get affected. The things that might get affected is some of the curricular things, some of the accrediting things, some of the licensing things, some of the things that, maybe we could do a better job if the state did them. And because the state has a different scenario than Idaho, than Minnesota does. So maybe the states could be more efficient with that money. And so that's what we're waiting to see, is where are those crucial services? People love to say, oh, they're not going to have lunches. Well, that's not going to happen. The things that are crucial to touch the child, the student, may end up in a different agency. When we find out what we're in charge of in education, now it's on us to be more efficient and effective, because we don't want to be 20th in the world in education. If we were 20th in the nation in football, Ross, how long would we last? 3 years before they ran us out of town? Or maybe 1 year, okay? But, so I think everything gets blown up. Not that the media ever does that, but, everything gets blown up a little bit. But I think we're thinking right, and we're going to learn through some of our mistakes because we've been inefficient for so long.
But we are also hearing from teachers and school districts around the state of Ohio. 89% of the students still go to public schools here. Public school money funding is being cut in the current state budget. $1 billion is set aside for the voucher program that our studies have shown most of that money is going to families who never had an intention of sending their kids to a public school. It's going to, including families, as an example, in Upper Arlington, who have always sent their children to Catholic schools there. And people are saying that's not a struggling school system. It's one of the top school systems in the state. Are we doing what we should be doing with our education dollars in Ohio? If $1 billion is being set aside for private and parochial schools, while funding is being cut to public schools.
So I think the K through 12 conversation is going to be an interesting one. The budgets are just starting to roll out. The governor put his as introduced out in February. The House got theirs out, somewhere in April. We're expecting any minute here now.
It goes to the Senate next week.
Yeah, to the Senate, coming out. It's going to be an interesting conversation, and I don't know that there's any wrong viewpoints in that we still need to be more efficient than we've been with our people's dollars for K through 12 than we have been. I know that governor feels strongly about a parent having the choice of where they send their child. That's a fundamental thing that he believes in. And I think the third thing that is really being talked about a lot, and I think it should, is how effective are we being, and where is the enrollment going in certain areas. A lot of people talk about, well, we're not getting as much as we did last year. Well, again, haven't been diving into this K through 12, but if you have 20% less students, no, you're probably not going to get as much as you had last year. So I don't know how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be a lot more good, lively conversation here in the next 2 weeks. But the effectiveness of our K through 12 has got to get better. I mean, we're maybe, 29th or 30th best in K through 12 out of the 50 states? So we can't keep doing it that way. So we're going to have to figure out, and I don't think we're as efficient as we could be, so we better not keep doing it that way. So we got to fix both, and it'll be interesting to see, how it comes out.
On the university and college level, we are now seeing the elimination, including at Ohio State, at Youngstown State, at Ohio University, the elimination of DEI programs and all the jobs that went along with that. Do you think that was a smart move?
I never really had a large department in those areas because we couldn't afford it. We couldn't be effective or efficient because we didn't have the money for that. And really, philosophically, I'll be honest with you, I think that all of those type conversations need to happen every day, all day long in the classroom, and not Tuesday night with a special program run by a special office spending extra money. That's just, we didn't have it at Youngstown State. We didn't have enough money for that. I think part of the unraveling of that, if you will, was people being a little concerned that the balance of conversation wasn't, as balanced as it could have been. It might have been a little bit too far one way or the other. And I think as I listened to the legislators, the reason that was a big part of what they wanted to do was that they wanted to ensure that we had good, inclusive, diverse conversation. I always thought the word university meant unity in diversity. You left your hometown, which you grew up in, whatever it was, certain culture, certain beliefs, and you went to that place where people came in from lots of different places, and you learned about other cultures. You learned about people who didn't look like you, who didn't believe like you, who didn't think like you, who didn't prefer like you. And you created that unity and that diversity, and that's how you grew up. That was always the way that I thought, and it wasn't with a special department. It was in the classroom, in the dormitory, in the sports teams, in the marching band, in the plays, in the Baja Engineering race team, in the rocket team, in the concrete canoe team. And so the fact that we created so many departments, and I'm not picking on DEI, lots of different departments have been created at universities, have led to our inefficiency. We've got to get more efficient. I remember talking to Ross when he first got here, and he was looking over at things, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ross. Ross said, at first glance, I'm not sure we have a revenue problem here at Ohio State, but we might have a spending problem. Right? And that's our problem in K through 12. I mean, our revenue is what it is. That's our problem in higher ed, all 14 publics and our 50, plus privates. Our revenue is going to be what our revenue is. We can control our spending and make sure that we spend it on the things that have the most impact on the outcome, which is turning out great students, a great workforce, and a higher level of excellence in our education programs.
Okay, you've talked to Ross a couple of times, so I have to ask you this. Do you sit back and say, why are they coaching this game like that? Do you sit back and second guess when you're watching Ryan Day as an example and say, what is wrong with him when he calls? And say this loudly, the answer to this question.
I'm a dinosaur when it comes to football. I go in and sit in watch their meetings, and I'm like, wow, if I would have been that smart, I'd still be coaching. I mean, those guys they've got it going on. But you know, it's fun to watch. I had 14 teams this fall that I had a love for. Either ones I had coached at before, or ones where one of my guys was the head coach, or one of my guys was the coordinator. And Ellen would say to me, "You're more nervous about these 14 teams than you were about your own team." I say, "Yeah, because I can't do anything about what's going on in these 14 teams." But no, it's fun to watch. The evolution of football is amazing. A little bit like golf. Any golfers out there? Okay. Technology has changed things, right? You know, well, it's amazing what the gloves and the fact, you know, when Ross and I were playing, the shoulder pads were this big and the helmets were giant and you had knee pads down over, you could barely run. Now these guys are like deer and they're not carrying any weight. And after practice, it's like they went to the spa for recovery. I mean, technology and science and all that has changed so dramatically. And you see the product on the field. I mean, those guys can play.
But when the first year that you weren't coaching anymore, what was that transition like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. Every day was a joy.
But it had to.
In fact, I was home for a week. And Ellen said, "If you ask me one more time what I'm doing, I got a life. You better go find a life." I said, "Okay."
So when you took over at Youngstown State, that was certainly something completely different than what you had done in your career, because all of a sudden, as you said, you're the guy, and you are making decisions that will either transform a university or send it backwards. Mm-hmm. So what were your challenges at that point?
You know, I think you had to go into anything new like you did before. When I became a head coach, it was a whole different world. I had to listen and learn, find out what people were thinking, find out what was important to them, figure out what I didn't know. Well, then all of a sudden I became a president. Well, there's a whole bunch I didn't know, and I didn't pretend that I knew it, and I didn't pretend that, you know, that I would be extraordinary. In fact, in higher education, they have this thing called a vote of no confidence. It's a big deal, right? And I thought, you know what? We're going to have some fun when I start. So my first academic senate meeting, when I went there as president, and all these people are like, they're bringing a coach in here as president? Oh my gosh. And I said, hey, look, we're going to be busy. We got a lot to do. We got a lot of opportunity, got a lot of challenges. So let's do this. Let's have a vote of no confidence right now. Get this over with so we can get to work. And boom, we got to work and, you know, kind of disarmed them a little bit, because everyone is like, oh, we got a vote of no confidence hanging over your head. No, we've already voted. You're no good. So let's get to work. And so it was so much fun learning, you know, from them, finding out what was important to them. And you knew how important it was to the community, just like, I mean, the impact of Ohio State to the central Ohio. I mean, Intel would not be here without Ohio State, correct? Andrew would not be here without Ohio State, because the talent pipeline is extraordinary. And Youngstown State, it meant so much to that area. So it was so much fun being it was no less exciting being a president than it was as a coach.
So when you, I know I put you on the spot about, are you going to run for governor?
Not yet. You haven't. This has been kind of mellow. You've eased up over the years.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
Do you want some of my other kinds of questions?
Did you bring those?
Yeah,
Okay.
I always have those.
Okay.
But, you know, you, as I said, I think of you as being the coach. But you've been a university president. Now you are a lieutenant governor and you're working in workforce development. What are you hoping people view you as? What's the image Jim Tressel wants to put out there?
I don't know about an image, but I just hope that people know and understand and believe that I owe a lot to Ohio. I owe a lot to education. I owe a lot to so many people that I'm here trying to help. I don't know if that's a legacy, but I'm here to serve. And every day is a new adventure, but I'm not here with any agendas. A lot of people maybe go into something with the idea of going into something else. It's not why I'm here.
What do you hope for Ohio, let's say in the next 5 years? We know we're in the midst of some kind of a transformation that has so much possibility and also so many opportunities for roadblocks. And we've talked about them, the infrastructure and the housing and the taxation problem that we still have, the property taxes that people are fretting over. What path would you like to see Ohio take to make this a positive outcome 5 years from now?
I think the final step in any journey ultimately is that you believe you can. So we're talking a lot about the extraordinary opportunities we have at this moment. Now, there's a lot between those opportunities and the end of the day really believing we can get that done. And the only way we will get it done is if we really believe that we will, and will be willing to sometimes not have exactly what I would like out of it. That's what makes a good team. The best teams, we had 25 teams, 9 of them played for national championships. Those 9 teams were selfless. They didn't care about how many carries they had or how much they were mentioned in the newspaper or how much Colleen Marshall featured them on the TV. They just wanted what was best for the team, to see if the team could be the best they could be. If we could have that kind of selflessness as a state with the belief that we can take advantage of all these opportunities, we got a chance.
Well, we do know for sure in less than 2 years, Mike DeWine will be leaving the governor's office. You and I spoke briefly about that earlier. This is a man whose entire life has been dedicated to public service, public office. He's been a lieutenant governor, he's been in Congress, he's been in Senate. He's now the governor. You and I agreed that's the role that he probably relishes the most. Mm-hmm. What do you think this transition will be like for him when he's finally done and leaves office?
Well, one of the goals we have as part of his staff is that we finish so unbelievably strong that it's so obvious that we've got things going in the right direction that he'll be able to maybe sit on his porch for a minute, because he won't sit there for more than a minute, and just look out there and say, you know what? Things are going pretty well. And I really believe that he'll look back and genuinely be able to say and feel and believe that he cared about every Ohioan, that he wanted every Ohioan to reach their God-given potential. And I think he'll be very proud of the things he was involved with and the people that follow him. So that's what we wish for him. And so that's why we're all working so hard.
When he tapped you to be lieutenant governor, I remember the day in the newsroom, people were saying, Jim Tressel's going to be the lieutenant governor? And then we thought for a second and thought, that's brilliant. Strategically for Mike DeWine, that is brilliant because he is aligning himself with someone who is very much like Mike DeWine. You're considered to be even-keeled, steady, more middle of the road than extreme one way or the other. What's your relationship been like with him? And what are you getting out of this job right now, this job as Lieutenant Governor of Ohio?
So far I haven't found anything sitting in a meeting or listening to a stance that he has taken that I'm like, ooh, I don't know. And it's been amazing to me. Now I've only been here 110 days or whatever. And because he thinks things through and because he can articulate why it's important for the people because that's who he cares about. So what it's been like is I can see why the people on both sides of the aisle like Mike DeWine. And I bump into so many people on both sides of the aisle that say, I might not agree with everything he says or whatever, but you know what? I know he cares, and so what I've learned is it's really healthy to think things through and to think things from a vantage point where you're keeping everyone in consideration and not just your own selfish views or your own skewed views. He's great at it.
What's been the best and worst part of this job so far?
The worst part's going back and forth from Medina because I stay here 2 or 3 nights a week, and that's being away from home a little bit. That's been the worst. The best, you meet a lot of brand new young people who you're seeing their eyes are wide open and they can't wait to help the world. It's just like seeing a new set of players. And you get excited about, thinking about their future and seeing if you can be helpful. And so I think the best part is it's a whole nother team that I get to be a part of. I've been a part of a lot of teams. And, when my phone rings and if a name doesn't come up, that means you're not in my top 4,300 people. So I'm not answering it. But now I've got about another 70 or so new people. I got to put their name in the phone and added to, it's about the only good thing about getting old is your huddle gets bigger, and so my huddle's gotten bigger. And so that's been the best thing.
Well, we are out of time, so that's a good place to leave this off. And on behalf of the audience, I do want to thank you for your time on the field, your time in the president's office at Youngstown State, and now for serving the state as Lieutenant Governor. Jim Tressel.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we leaving? Oh, okay.
And I just want to say thank you, Colleen, and of course, Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel, for this meaningful and inspiring conversation that we've had here today. Thank you both. We are so grateful for your time. Thank you again to our leader sponsor, Voorhees, and our patron sponsor, Columbia Gas, and of course to our 2025 investor partners for their ongoing support. And on behalf of the Columbus Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us and supporting our business advocacy events series. We look forward to continuing to bring you relevant, timely, and impactful programming for 2025 and beyond. Thank you so much for being here today. If you want to see more upcoming events, please visit our website at columbus.org/events. Thank you so much. Have a great day.